Hey guys, thanks for joining us on the Football Diary podcast once again. Loads of football to talk through from this week, but the majority of what we're going to talk about is going to be off the field stuff, which is a shame. So the end of the last pod, we went quite vaguely into sort of what we knew about the European Super League, and a lot more's come out since then. So I just wanted to pick through that really. So what a strange week of football it started out being. Just to kind of break it down for you, the news broke on Sunday afternoon that there was going to be 12 teams in the European Super League, and 6 of those were from the Premier League. If you remember, Gary Neville was condemning the idea as just pure greed, live on Sky, and I think he echoed a lot of fans' views there. And that night, I think it was Monday night, the Leeds players were wearing protest T-shirts as well. Boris Johnson chimed in. Jurgen Klopp was angry. The Liverpool players sort of in unison on social media saying, we collectively believe this is not a good idea. Then on Tuesday, Florentino Perez, the Real Madrid president, saying that he's saving football because younger people are no longer interested in the sport, which is ludicrous. And then by Tuesday evening, all 6 English clubs have one by one dropped out of the idea and posted some very sort of questionable posts on social media with statements saying, this is not what we're about. This was an error of judgment. And I think it's fair to say fans aren't buying it. So I think it's left a pretty bitter taste in fans' mouths. And I just want to get your guys' opinions on where that leaves the relationship between boards and fans now. Not just to the top 6 Premier League teams, but football fans generally. So we've seen protests around the UK, outside football grounds, saying that the owners have got to go. Change has got to happen. Dave, you're a Man United fan, so I'll start with you. The Glazers were always a contentious set of owners for United anyway. I think a lot of fans had their number from day one. Most fans did. Right now, their intentions of buying the club and owning the club are crystal clear to all of us. If it wasn't obvious enough before, is there any way back for the Glazers to regain some respectability and rebuild a relationship with the fans now? And where does the club go from here, in your opinion?
No, I think obviously the Glazers are, there's been ill feeling around them ever since they took over the club, really. Obviously, the branching off of FC United, Manchester, took away a lot of the United fans. Obviously, a lot, but it's just a drop in the pond in terms of the global scale of Manchester United. But I think it's just reiterated the problem that they are, and a lot of the owners in the top 6, and what the only thing they're interested in, it's obviously money.
Yeah. That's crystal clear.
That's all it revolves around. And obviously we've seen earlier on in the week, we've seen the response, the responses from the owners, and the apologies obviously from the likes of Arsenal, and I think obviously a lot of them drop on thin air, but the Glazers just not bothered. Right? The initial response to it was, when we're coming out, we're pulling out of the Super League. There was no apology at all. It took until the Friday, this week, for them to actually issue a letter, and obviously apparently that came from Joel Glazer, which obviously didn't. Someone, it's probably what's his name, who used to work for the Sun, probably typed it up for him and put his name on it to make it sound like he had some feeling of regret, but there's nothing there. And then obviously there was a Mirror reporter, wasn't there, that went over to, I can't remember where it was in the US, and obviously confronted Avram and asked him if you wanted, you're going to give him apologies, and he refused to. Refused to apologise there and then. Obviously, kind of commented on it, and obviously they asked if they were going to sell the club, and he said no comment. So it's very much up in the air. I think in terms of the whole fan reaction, you can just see you don't need me to say it. Everyone's saying the same thing, that it's just absolute bizarre. The whole fiasco. I suppose you can call it a fiasco because, I think the scary part is that I feel like some actually had the fear at one point where it was going to happen.
Yeah, I think most of us did. I think we were on Sunday evening last week thinking, this is the end of football as we know it. And most of the clubs that we love watching, we're all going to sort of close themselves off and play each other, which doesn't appeal to anyone. And I think for me, the staggering thing is that they thought that was what fans would want, these owners and the ringleaders of this whole thing. And the fans' voice has unanimously said pretty much, no, this is our club. You're not taking it. You're not doing this to us, It's not in the interest of anyone but yourselves at the end of the day. John, I'll go to you next. On the question of fans' relationships with their clubs now and with their boards, especially the ones affected, is there any way back for them, in your opinion?
I think fans and boards, they've always had a bit of a fickle relationship anyway, unless someone takes ownership of a club and then spends a lot of money, like Abramovich did back in the day for Chelsea. And then, the Arab guys coming over for Man City, just spending ridiculous money on players to then essentially kind of buy a league title and the manager and the kind of power to do it. I mean, talking about West Ham, they've never, ever since sort of Gold and Sullivan have been there, they've not really had a good relationship with the fans for multiple reasons, because of the way they were trying to run the club, turn it into a business for them to generate money and not sort of feed it back into the club. And I think that's the overriding factor with this, that all of the owners, they're doing it to make more money, but they already have a ridiculous amount anyway. They're just so out of touch with what people want. I mean, grassroots football is about competition, and then to have some form of competition where you can win but never be relegated, there's no consequences, it takes away any form of competition. So it was a flawed idea from the start. I've come out afterwards, and I think as Perez has been saying, like, oh, you can't leave it, you're in a binding contract. It's not just a matter of saying I don't want to be in it anymore. So, we'll see what the ramifications are over the coming months, but yeah, boards and fans have always been weird, unless you end up like Chelsea, City and United for a number of years, where they're winning or challenging for stuff week in, week out, year in, year out. It goes under the radar a lot, but when you're not, again, West Ham prime example, there's never that great a relationship. I mean, Leicester, one of the only teams I can really think of that have had a superb kind of all-round relationship, and that was unfortunately shrouded in sort of tragedy a few years ago. But, talking about the board and fans, it's, always been a bit odd, in my opinion. And I think that's echoed from what you guys have been saying this week. And I know we've been talking a lot off camera this week between ourselves as well. And the feedback I've got in the football groups that I'm in, that I play on a sort of Tuesday and Thursday night, they're all saying the same sort of thing. And it's quite unanimous that people just don't want it.
No, I think that's we had so many questions on last Sunday's pod about why they were doing it, what the intentions were, what was going to happen to players, did they have a choice? None of these questions were even considered before they made the announcement. And I think that's the staggering thing for me. They had a group of owners who were meant to be sort of successful businessmen and actually didn't even think about any of these elements. These are massive, massive things and integral to the whole thing working. I don't think they had a TV broadcast right lined up or anything like that. So that was meant to be the main source of income for this whole thing working. And they were funded by an American bank as well, which hinged on the cooperation of players, of managers, and it's just not happened. And I don't know why they're surprised, because it was doomed to fail. It's such a blatantly greedy thing to do that I'm surprised that it was even a thought in the first place. And especially the amount of things that weren't considered before they made the announcement is staggering, really. Myles, I've gone to you. I know you've got a lot of thoughts on it. Unleash, let us know your thoughts as well. What do you reckon?
I think first and foremost, the saddest part of it all is it's just highlighted the hypocrisy in football among everyone. The only people that can hold their heads up in all of this are the fans. And it's really nice seeing active change taking place because of fans. That's where it comes from. It's sad that again is down to money and a fear of losing money more than anything else. I truly believe that. But it's so frustrating to see how many people are exercising such kind of pathetic behaviour. I think there are a few clubs that I look at more culpable than others in it as well. So I'll think of the likes of Real Madrid and Barcelona. They're clearly in it for self-interest in terms of the fact that they're both broke, and this was their opportunity to save themselves. Clubs like Man City and Chelsea have both said, we joined it mainly because we didn't want to fall behind. They don't need to. They can afford to not do that. Kind of all of the English clubs are in that position. But Real Madrid and Barcelona, clearly self-interest. Juventus is such a weird one. Agnelli and his family have owned that club for so long, and yet can be so detached from the reality of what football means to their fans and the culture of Turin. It's bizarre. He's come out with some whack stuff before. His comments about Atalanta not deserving to be in the Champions League because they don't have enough history in the competition, when they lost to Atalanta the other day on the eve of the Super League being released, which is brilliant. Man United, Liverpool and Arsenal really hurts, because you look at, I've got the club statements in front of me because I wanted to share something from it that I just thought was absolutely typical, and I'll get moaned at for this, but I'm going to moan about Liverpool first. Liverpool, I think, held themselves so poorly in all of this. I felt awful for Jurgen Klopp to push 100%. Him out first. They had the disadvantage of being the first club to play after the news had broke. Man United sort of had it, but not many details have come out yet. So to throw Klopp in front of it, and then the first statement Liverpool released was, Liverpool Football Club can confirm that our involvement in proposed plans to form a European Super League has been discontinued. In recent days, the club has received representations from various key stakeholders, both internally and externally, and we would like to thank them for their valuable contributions. So they thanked the people that tried to put them in it before they apologised to the fans that were going to suffer from it. Eventually, Henry came out and did that pathetic apology.
Oh, it was cringe, yeah.
I
mean, they badly misread the room, really, didn't they? I don't think they considered at all how it looked from the outside and a PR point of view, what disaster it was for the club. And there was even talk of the Shankly family saying that they wanted the statue removing if the club was to continue. Yeah, which I thought, do you know what? That's a bold thing to say.
Yeah,
but, I mean, that just demonstrates how fondly they are of the club's traditions and the way they are, and how against the prospect of that being taken away and competing in a Champions League or a European Cup and what that means. I mean, Liverpool are intrinsic with Champions League and the European Cup. United were one of the pioneers of European Cup competition in the 50s. So I don't know how they can just ignore that and say, do you know what? This idea is a lot better. They've so badly misread what the fans would think. The handling of the boards and the owners in public afterwards was equally naive. I'm gobsmacked.
The other thing that I thought was really interesting, and where Klopp kind of dropped the ball as well, was them complaining about the T-shirts that Leeds were wearing. I mean, if I was associated with Liverpool, I probably wouldn't complain about T-shirts you wear in their recent history. And that's another example of the hypocrisy we've seen. The outrage that all the clubs have formed and the talk of discipline in these people is far stronger than anything we've seen on matters that really should be being dealt with first. If a load of rich clubs want to go and get richer, it hurts. It does ruin parts of our game. But so does racial abuse, which we cannot eradicate from the game. FIFA formed a committee a few years ago to get rid of racism, and they disbanded after about 6 months saying, yep, job done. How? Yeah. That was the level of input they put into that. Yet the amount of work and the amount of word we've heard from FIFA and UEFA on this just shows priorities. Money. Yeah. Even Sky. Gary Neville has spoken so well about all of this on Sky Sports, who monopolised football in this country first and foremost. Everything he's been saying has been behind a paywall. And there was one occasion where it wasn't. Monday Night Football, they put it on Sky One so that everyone could see Sky standing up to the man until kickoff. And then they moved it back to Sky Sports, so you had to pay to watch the game again. So everyone's as bad as each other. Arsenal are the club that I feel the most for the fans when I read about it, because they've become the laughing stock of it, of they're not even good enough to be in it. And I read, my girlfriend and her family are all Arsenal fans, and her brother sent me a banner that some of the fans put outside it, and it says, "You stole our crest, we stayed. You took our home, we moved. Wherever you went, we followed. Whatever price you demanded, we paid. All for you to go and sell our soul." And it is 100% true. I've always thought, Arsenal fans moan a bit too much about their owners. But when you put it like that, it's transparent of, we don't care. Kroenke doesn't care about what they are. Their first apology was, oh, yeah, sorry, we messed up. Come on. That
was kind of the gist of it as well. It was like an error of judgment or something like that. You can't make an error of judgment about a decision that financially would would ruin a lot of clubs in the football pyramid. They must have known the ramifications of that. If
It
they
would have been
didn't,
planned
they're
for months as
staggeringly
well. That's the other thing. It would have been planned for ages. It's not just a matter of turning on a light switch and suddenly the Super League's invented and we're all part of it. They would have had to have been loads of discussions behind the scenes about it. I mean, fair play. I know that, they're talking about T-shirts. That's probably a bit of a deflection tactic in fairness. But Klopp and Milner, fair play to them for just going against the owners, because you can't. That is super organic and down to the person's individual ethics and their beliefs. And for how much Liverpool sort of are and aren't hated by fans for various reasons, like fair play for them just coming out as people and being like, "Nah, I like football."
Again, though, with that, there is still a level of hypocrisy. With Milner and Klopp, maybe not so much. But I think about the Man City players that were coming out and complaining about this, but are perfectly happy picking up 300 grand a week from a club that are run by people who were known to have a disastrous human rights record. Again, footballers are happy to speak when it's good for their PR. But if it's lining their pockets, then they can turn a blind eye. And that really frustrated me too. So it was really nice seeing the Chelsea fans start the protest, Man United joining in, Arsenal. Good. Let the fans speak about it and have that. Man United as well. Ed Woodward trying to say, well, I'm leaving because I didn't want to think. What a load of absolute nonsense. That is the rats fleeing the sinking ship, isn't it? He clearly was like, can I get away from this with any credibility? Let me say I had nothing to do with it. Rubbish.
Well, prior to that, I think he'd left the UEFA board before that as well, because he knew he'd be out of the club anyway. So his card was marked before, but I don't think he'd be welcome at United anytime soon.
And these are the same clubs that tried to push Project Big Picture,
which was a disgrace as well.
Over the last 12 months has been, how do we make ourselves more powerful and sack everyone else up? When you see clubs dropping like flies in the lower leagues, and it can only get worse if we can't get fans back in. And these clubs are going, all right, but how do we get 400 million instead of 300? It's pathetic. And let's be 100% honest. The Premier League complained, but they ain't going to kick these teams out because it'll hurt their pockets. And if the 6 clubs had stayed and said, okay, we each get 300 million. We'll give 25% of that to the Premier League, each club. All of a sudden, they would have stayed in our league, 100%. Juventus' statement is hilarious as well, because at the end of Juventus' statement, they basically say, we reckon it will still happen in some way, shape or form. It says, Juventus remain committed to pursuing the creation of long-term value for the company and the entire football industry. In context, while Juventus remains convinced of the soundness of this project, commercial and legal premises, it believes that at present there are limited chances of the project being completed in the original form conceived. So they still think it'll happen. And the other 6 clubs aren't going to say no if they feel like it will mean they drop behind. So it's easy for them to drop out now because they know they look like they had their card marked. But we'll see.
Well, in some ways, though, it's harder for the teams in the European, the fans of the European teams that were involved in it have kind of got it more difficult than the English fans, because, I mean, at least we got some kind of level of apology, however disingenuous it might have been. But the Spanish teams, especially Real Madrid and Barcelona, have absolutely said they want to be involved in the future. What does that say about them? But I mean, what does that say about their priorities? They're so far in debt, and they're blaming spiraling player wages, which is an issue that they created, all those teams. And the Juventus fans, how must they be feeling? They're an institution. So, staggering.
The last thing I'll rant about, but Florentino Perez, my word, that guy has said some funny things this week, talking about how people between the ages of 16 and 24 don't like football, basically. Made me feel really old, because I have to think that I love football this much. I must be ancient by now, by the way he was talking. He basically is trying to create FIFA Ultimate Team instead of La Liga. It's pathetic. He's talking about the standard of football and the quality of the games would be so much better. Well, is that true? Anytime a top 6 team in England plays another top 6 team in England, we can probably bet on it being a 0-0. I've just watched Spurs City. Dreadful game. Absolutely dreadful. All right, PSG and Bayern played a good game in the Champions League. They didn't even want part of this. So it wouldn't raise the standard of football at all. It would still just become the same thing where people were cagey, and it would just become dull. And
try not to lose.
Otherwise.
I think on the subject of priorities as well, and how obvious the priorities are skewed towards money, I was really impressed with Patrick Bamford after the Leeds-Liverpool game. They asked him about his take on it, and he was quite mature, saying, I'm pretty much a fan. I know as much as you do. I've seen it on Twitter. However, what I will say is I wish as much energy went into issues like racism and as much outrage went into dealing with that as we've seen in the last sort of 24, 48 hours. So, fair play to him for that. And I think a lot of the players that came out and said, very vocally how against this way they were, fair play to them as well. These are their bosses at the end of the day. So they didn't have to. But I think kudos to them for actually coming out and saying something.
But why aren't more players speaking out about the fact they're playing a World Cup in Qatar next summer then? Or next winter? Do you know what I mean? It's the same thing. Again, this one, easy PR stunt. Bamford spoke very, very well, but his club weren't involved. So it was really easy for him in a position to go, I think it's awful. If he gets an England call-up for the World Cup next year, he ain't going to complain, though. And that's just as bad in many ways. I don't buy much of it, to be honest. Maybe I'm too cynical.
Yeah, well, I think the whole situation's made us all quite cynical, and rightly so. And I think when you look at issues like that in hindsight, through the lens of the outrage we've seen over the last sort of week about money and heritage being kind of cast aside, the thought of that much energy being put into the tackling of racism, for example, how much difference could be made if that was the case, especially from the very top? If as much money was invested, even a fraction of money was invested in penalising clubs as much as they're talking about penalising these top 6 English teams next season potentially, then what kind of deterrent would that be? And what kind of message would that send out? But will it happen? No, of course it won't. Of course it won't. But yeah, we can only dream. So yeah, a bit of a strange week. Dave, have you got anything to say on that? You've been remarkably quiet so far.
To be honest, I was just going to mention that sort of how much of the sort of enthusiasm it actually drained out of me hearing the news on that. I think it was obviously the game where it was Leeds against Liverpool midweek.
Yeah,
it was the day after following it, and I looked at that fixture and I just thought, normally I'd be quite happy that Liverpool would drop points, but it just I just thought before the game, I thought, don't even know if I want to watch this because I don't honestly, how must the players feel going into those games?
Yeah.
You must feel, you've got to feel for some of those players, there must be completely drained of their morale, must be gone, completely just, I'd be distraught really, because everything you play for and live for and want to achieve in football, there's no dreams if there's no Champions League, there's no Europe. Because that's ultimately what the top 6 and the top 8 clubs, you look at the likes of Leicester, they've gone from almost getting relegated to the Championship for the next season, winning the Premier League, and then they're in the Champions League against Atletico Madrid in the quarterfinal. That's absolutely ridiculous when you think about it. And these are the sort of things that fans, even of smaller clubs, that we dream of, and without European football, it wouldn't be a reality or a possibility. And it's just, I think after that game, I just thought, I'm not really that bothered.
Yeah, he left a hollow feeling, and I think that's why I was asking the question about fans' relationships now with the game. Even
the rest of the season, I just thought, United, had a half decent season, the second, but what's the point of trying? Can you imagine the Leicester players turning up to training and think, we've done all this hard work, we're 3rd in the league, and we might not even get to play in Europe next year. I'll just be like, what's the point? May as well go back home, go to bed.
That Liverpool game in particular came at a time where we thought it was going to happen. It was very set. So that literally would have meant nothing. Because what were Liverpool playing for? Competing for the top 4 is the only thing left in their season now. But if they weren't going to be in the Champions League and were going to qualify for this anyway, it didn't matter. So it completely took out any purpose of that game, which would have been the problem going forward. I came home on Tuesday from work, and I felt miserable. And Nia said to me, "What's the matter?" And it was football. I just thought that the game that we all love was gone. It just felt like the landscape of everything had changed, and I was certain it was going to go ahead at one point. I'm so glad that it moved as quickly as it did. Super League ended less long.
That's the amount of power the clubs have got, though, isn't it? In the end. If the clubs actually wanted to go ahead with this and they pressed ahead and it did happen, it definitely would happen. And that's the scary thing. They have so much power to make this kind of thing a reality. that, do you know what? I don't think it's off the shelf at all. I think it's been put on hold for maybe a decade, or a lifetime, but it will come back.
Yeah, that's why it's important now that there needs to be legislation put into place by the UK government that ensures that these owners can't action or get this good thing, in place. Because at the end of the day, if they had the choice to do it again now, tomorrow, and there was press of a button, it'd go ahead, and they wouldn't care what fans think. At the end of the day, it's a fans' game. It's what we look forward to at the weekend. On a weekday, if you had a crap day at work and you want something to look forward to, you look forward to the football at night. And we all go through these highs and lows in emotions when we win or lose. But we stick with like United. Been absolutely terrible for the last 7 years, but it's like a drug. We're probably going to play absolutely terrible again the next game, but you do it because you're a fan and you want you want to be excited and you want to do better. It's the love for the game that keeps football going. If it wasn't for the fans, we've seen it in COVID. Without fans, it's just
not the same.
Yeah. On that note, actually, I'll move on to the Carabao Cup final and the situation at Spurs as well, because first of all, let me just say it was great to see fans back in a stadium, however few there were, but what a difference they made to just the overall atmosphere. I mean, what was the 2,000 from each team? But it's just nice to hear actual crowd noise and not something fake just for TV. So first point was that. Second point is Jose Mourinho sacked by Tottenham on the week of the cup final. Now, this would be headline news in any week. This was coming, but the timing of it, he's meant to be a serial winner. This cup was meant to have his name written all over it. Yet they've put Ryan Mason in charge, who's never managed a game in his life, for the cup final, thinking we've probably got a better shot of winning it under him than Mourinho. So what does that say about Jose Mourinho now? And is there any way back into top-level football management for him? John, I'll start with you first. Did you see the cup final first of all? But also Jose Mourinho, can he get back into top-level football again? Or is it time for him to just go, let's call it a day, I've had a good run?
I think with managers, they have a lot of form issues, the same as players seem to, where they are either very popular and unbeatable, or they have this little dip. And it's then how they come out of the dip, whether it makes them better or not. Mourinho's been at the top for such a long time. You look at what he'd done with the teams for the Champions League back in the day, which was absolutely unheard of with a team that he won with. Then, called himself a special one at Chelsea. Goes on to win basically everything. I just think that as he's got older, I wouldn't say he's got arrogant as such, but he just seems a bit out of touch with what the kind of modern philosophy of football is, and still seems to think that his way will work, it's not my way or the highway. But it's been proven, unfortunately, now on quite a few occasions that it just doesn't stack up anymore. You've got your Guardiolas and Klopp, another one. They're kind of revolutionised the modern game with slick, their passing style. Look at Barcelona and Guardiola was there. That's then filtered down to other clubs and teams, and it's really big style. And even little teams try to adapt it. So with Mourinho in general, maybe he might manage a national team at some point, whether that's England, because English fans seem to love him, if the FA won't want to go out and win, but I think he needs to do something else first, or Portugal. That's kind of all I really see for him. I'm sure that someone else would give him another chance. He's not old. You look at some of the managers that have been around look how long Ferguson went for. So really, he's got a good 10 years left in him, if not longer, if he wants to do it. But he says the fire burns. It doesn't seem like that translates from the dressing room onto the pitch. He's had a few good performances. Tottenham looked very, very slick a few games, but it was every now and then. It wasn't consistent. So I've always quite liked him. I've had a soft spot for him, but I just think that, where else can he go and destroy now? And does he want to take over Arsenal and make them worse? That's my take. I've always quite liked him. I thought when he was self-proclaimed as a special one, I thought it was hilarious, and then just went on to be this master tactician that won everything. So fair play to him, but maybe the ship sailed. Maybe I'll eat my hat in a couple of years and he'll win something big. But yeah, who knows?
Yeah, he's had a good run in top-level football. I think up until he went to, I think it was probably Real Madrid. And after that, he didn't seem to really be in competition for winning trophies. At United, won the Europa League. But I think the energy he brings to a club, as a United fan, he came out of that club leaving it in such a toxic way. The players were so negative, and the football as well was so negative to watch. I mean, in hindsight, you forget, but at the time, Dave, it was just bloody miserable to watch. And I think it's had a similar position at Spurs by the sound of it. The players seem liberated to have someone like Ryan Mason in charge, who is pretty much the anti-Mourinho, let's face it, club favourite, nice guy. Everybody at the club likes him. And I think the club were just hoping to get a new manager bounce in time, and it very nearly pulled off. So, actually fair play to the board for that. But what does that say about Jose Mourinho? I think, like you said, John, his methods don't really translate to the current modern football way of doing things. And I think that even extends to managing players. I think he manages them like an old school manager would, but they're all quite young and, in tune with what's going on in the world and connected socially to everybody around them. And I think he tries to apply the same management he did to John Terry and Frank Lampard back in the day. And it's just not going to work. Footballers are a different breed these days. They're young kids in his eyes. And I think he's still trying to do the same tactically as well. He's still parking the bus every now and again. And I don't think he would have done any differently in this cup final had he had the chance. It still would have been a park the bus approach, which would have been a disgusting watch for everybody. I mean, it wasn't great anyway, but a Mourinho final would have been, I think, a whole lot worse than a Ryan Mason final, that's for sure. Myles, do you want to chime in on this one? Where does Mourinho go next?
I think it's not so much that Mourinho isn't in touch with the modern game. I think it's English football. I think he probably needs to go to a different country. I think the culture of English football has changed more than it has across Europe. I think the kind of pressure from the press and the kind of attitude of the players has always been different in this country. Mourinho is a very passionate character, and if you give him the right dressing room, I still think there could be success there. Tottenham was the wrong job for him, really. It was a young squad who have been with Pochettino and developing under him and developed an insane bond. That bringing in someone who's quite as disciplined as Mourinho was always going to be tough. And actually, I think he's got a bit of a harsh rap with this. Should Spurs be doing a bit more than they currently are doing? Maybe, but that squad is weaker in many ways. And I think I heard today during the final, they said that Spurs have scored as many goals this season in all competitions as Man City have. Now, this is a manager that everyone says parks the bus. I think Mourinho just has a name in the British press now where they're always going to look for that narrative. And although he is quite a spiky character, I still think I'm an apologist for Jose. I think I look at where he'll go next and think there are a few jobs that maybe he just needs to humble himself enough to go to that kind of set. I mean, he already did with Spurs, obviously, but kind of stay at that level rather than push for another job. A few years ago, if Bayern was saying their manager was going like they are this season, he would have been in line for that job. He's not now. However, if Nagelsmann goes there, maybe Leipzig is his level. Juventus might look to move Pirlo on. He's not going to get that job. But Inzaghi might move on from Lazio. Maybe Mourinho could go there, or even Roma if they get rid of Fonseca. There's still a tier of clubs where I think he could go and just build that reputation back up. I just don't think it's in England.
Okay, interesting.
The Portugal job would be a great one for him for a bit of time, but their manager's been incredibly successful with them and won the European Championship, obviously. If they crash out of the group stages, can I see the Portuguese FA thinking, Mourinho is available, that could be good for us? Maybe. But other than that, I think he just needs to... Benitez, for example, after he left Real Madrid, his stock was down, so he went to Newcastle. And to Everton. Sometimes you do just have to go, okay, where can I find my feet again? And I don't think it should be in England. He needs to separate himself from England a bit, because I do still think he brings success, but just in very different forms to England expected, maybe.
Interesting. Yeah, I could probably see him in Italy. I think Serie A is kind of somewhere he could go. I think the Bundesliga's got too many young, dynamic coaches, and I think, like you say, Nagelsmann's left quite an impression at Leipzig. So if they were going to go to a Mourinho-style management, again, I'm thinking stereotypes here. Is that going to be undoing everything that Nagelsmann had done at the club? Yeah, probably. I think Leipzig are a club on the up, not plateauing or on the down. So maybe, but Serie A needs a kick up the backside. Maybe it's time to return to Italy for Jose. Dave, you obviously had... I remember you being quite outspoken about the Jose Mourinho era at Manchester United. What's your impression of him from that? And has it changed since he's been at Tottenham?
No, I think you've already touched upon it, really, is that I think he's had a failure to change his methods and his approaches, and amongst sort of the changing progressive nature of the English game. And obviously, now English football it's becoming, I think transition quicker. I think teams are, especially some of the smaller teams and towards the bottom of the league, are more adept at countering. I think that's why you see a lot of smaller teams sitting back, and especially with United, they do find it hard to break teams down, and teams know that this is an approach that United struggle with. And I think with Mourinho, in terms of his methods and approaches, I think they are a bit dated. And I think that's why when the news came out that Tottenham were interested in him, I think a lot of United fans were actually found it quite laughable, really. It was relief when he left United, because the amount of toxicity that was from going through the changing rooms upwards to the top of the club. I think partly it's the whole hiring of Mourinho. To be honest, when we first brought him in, there was a lot of excitement because there was an idea that he could bring success back to United. And his first season, he had a brilliant first season. We came second in the league, won the Europa League, and there was a good feeling about it all. But I think in terms of, I don't think the Glazers handled it right. We gave him an extension, and then decided not to back him in the transfer window. And we said, you can't have Harry Maguire, because we don't think he's the right player. And you can't have Toby Alderweireld, because he's not the right player. He's not better. I think their words was, from Ed Woodward, they're not better than what we currently have.
Which is an absolute joke.
Not that you feel passionate about it.
Guy who was injured, I think, he has been injured quite a lot of his time at United. And then a year later, we go and pay 80 million for Harry Maguire. So all of a sudden, Harry Maguire's now all of a sudden, twice the player apparently from the year before, when he wasn't good enough from what we already have. So you've got to say that it's just been, it's been a complete mess at United for the last few years, and the ownership of mainly, you've got to say the responsibility lies with them. Going back to Mourinho, where do I think he goes from now? I think, like you were saying, maybe Serie A. It's a bit more of a, in a way, tactical, in that they are defensive. They're more defensively drilled units, I think, in Serie A. And I think there's less unpredictability in games. I do feel like he'll probably suit a team probably in the top 6 in Italy, but it's a bit strange one. I think it's going to be very alien to him, because he's got this huge ego where he's one of the best managers in the world, and to be honest, I don't know whether you can say that anymore.
That's the thing. He was, wasn't
he? Do I also think that Portugal will go for him? I don't think they will. They've had a couple of managers in the last few years who've just been very defensively minded. Obviously, they took Carlos Queiroz back for a fixed period when it was disaster. They've got arguably the best chance, I think, of winning a European honour this year at the Euros, and then arguably next year World Cup, where they've probably got their best team they've had in 2 decades.
Yeah.
Can I just say something quick?
Go on.
Yeah.
And this is I'm taking this out on you, Dave, but this is because it's something that happens a lot. I love Serie A. I think it's brilliant. Italian football is my favourite to watch in many, many ways. And you hear a lot, it's just a really defensive league. It's a bit boring and really conservative. So this year in the Premier League, there have been 854 goals. In Serie A, there's been 979.
There we go.
Defending Serie A, I love it.
No, fair play to you, mate. I mean, Serie A's got a bad rap, I think, for being defensive, but that's probably a 30-year-old viewpoint. That's been standing since 30 years ago, pretty much.
Bottom 10 teams in Serie A are absolutely terrible. Bottom teams in Premier League, you put the bottom 10 in the Premier League against the bottom 10 in Serie A. I think I
don't know if I agree with that. I was going to say West Brom, but they're probably beating Villa right now.
You still see the late likes of AC Milan, Inter Milan, Juventus trashing these bottom teams. Crotone 6-0. And it doesn't happen as often anymore in the Premier League. Like those sort of scorelines don't happen as
Villa beat Liverpool 7-2.
Yeah, these struggling teams at the bottom. Yeah,
Villa are losing to West Brom right now, by the way.
Perfect timing there. But no, I see your point. I saw Serie A as a little bit of a retirement home lately because there's a lot of like veteran players going there, isn't there? It's a bit like an MLS style migration over there, and I don't know what it is about it. Zlatan at 39 is just renewing his contract with Milan, and they're getting a reputation for that now. So you're going to have to do some convincing, Myles.
Some good young players too, man. When at the Euros, when players like Chiesa are playing, you'll see. I think Italy have got some good talent there, man. I like it.
I know. I'm not going to slate them. I'm just winding you away. I can see you pushing your buttons slowly.
That's a common thing with me. All my friends that know how much I like football just think I'll pick on Serie A. That all I'm Miles up.
Yeah. Well, it does clearly. Quite passionate. It's good to see. So on to the EFL Cup final, the Carabao Cup final, if you like, the League Cup final. I hate all the names it's got. Not much of a spectacle. I don't think you managed to watch it, did you, Dave? But you know what? You probably had the best plan out of anybody. It was a dull affair. Would it be any more dull if Jose Mourinho was in charge? Who's to know? But based on what we're saying, probably. Ryan Mason, to be fair, had very little experience at any level of football, let alone a cup final. And Tottenham only held their own really because Man City couldn't finish. They dominated from start to finish. But I think this is Pep Guardiola's fourth Carabao Cup win in a row. Is that right?
Yeah,
which is mental. So he's taking it quite seriously. Yeah, overall. So he's taking it seriously. I think it's a cup that's taken a lot of stick lately. But are you reading into this at all? This extra trophy for Man City? Are you kind of thinking, do you know what? It's a trophy. A trophy is a trophy at the end of the day. And if Tottenham would have won it, they'd be celebrating probably more than any other team because of what it means to them. Is it devalued in any way because it's Man City? I'll start with you, John, actually. What do you think? What do you reckon? Did you watch it?
Yeah, I caught most of it. I had it on like in the background, and my mate Ross is a Spurs fan and has been since he was like a young lad. So out of my friendship group, we've got Spurs, Liverpool, and myself, West Ham, and my mate Sly's Chelsea. So out of the fallout of everything, there's been quite a few discussions. But part of me, I wanted Spurs to win because it's again like the smaller club, so to speak. Especially as it is currently beating the favourite. So in a cup final, I think you always want a little bit of mystique, and it proves that football's football. Ryan Mason, 29-year-old coach, had to retire at 26 because of a crazy skull fracture. So it would have been like a really nice story. The flip side of it is, could I deal with Ross and every other Tottenham fan being like, well, we won a cup like 2 years ago in 2023? Probably not. So I'm not that bothered either way. So, as you already said, Mike, it wasn't that great a game, unfortunately. I think that Spurs had one shot on target and one off. Man City just couldn't put the ball in the net and just fumbled a little bit in the final third like they have on and off this season. I weren't really that fussed either way, to be honest. It would have been nice for my mate Ross, but I'm just glad that I'm not going to get Tottenham fans saying, well, we won a cup last year for the next one.
To be fair, it would have been unbearable, actually, listening to Spurs fans milking that. I think the last time they won it was, 2008 or something, and that was the League Cup as well. Jonathan Woodgate scored the winner or something, if I remember rightly. So, a long time ago, basically. Yeah, it was. Yeah, going back some years. But, Man City win the cup again. Aymeric Laporte scored the winner from a header. Question that he might not, shouldn't maybe have been on the pitch in the first place. Yeah. Myles, did you see the incident? Both incidents, really, because he should have had 2 yellow cards, I think.
To be honest, you asked me about this game. It was such a boring affair. Yeah, Laporte probably should have been sent off, but even that, I don't know how much of a difference it really would have made. Tottenham couldn't get into it. You ask whether it would have been more boring if Mourinho had been there. Harry Kane, top scorer in the league, most assists in the league. Today, didn't have a single shot on goal, didn't create a single chance. They just were not in it. And I feel for Ryan Mason, but let's be honest. This whole thing with Spurs this week really felt like Levy trying to bury bad news. There is no reasonable explanation for why Mourinho goes this week. There just isn't. He cannot have thought that Mason would have a better chance of winning that cup.
I think he genuinely did. I do.
I think he was just trying to change the narrative because everyone has been moaning about every club involved in the Super League. Tottenham haven't really been spoken about that much, partly because it's ridiculous in the first place that they were in it. But I do think half of it is because of Jose. Levy's played a blinder. He knew he wanted rid of him. He knew they were going to lose the League Cup. So let me sacrifice this guy here and get rid of it. It was rubbish, wasn't it? It was a non-affair. Tottenham have got a lot of good attacking players, and they couldn't get them involved in the game. I watched the City Villa game this week as well, and I watched the way that they build play up, and I cannot understand how they don't win every single game. They are fantastic. Use that number 9 at the moment. If they sign Haaland in the summer, then there's no help for anyone.
Game over. Yeah.
Because they just weren't clinical enough today, and they should have been 5-0 up against Villa within 10 minutes the other day as well. They look fantastic.
Speaking of what needed to be 5-0 up at the end of the game, Liverpool-Leeds was way back on Monday, if you can remember, but the amount of chances Liverpool spurned in that game as well was very similar. They're going for a pretty rough patch at the minute, but the amount of chances they created, I mean, that gives me some sort of idea that they'd be back to their best at some point. They're just a bit out of sync at the minute with players missing, but they've got 22 shots, I think they had altogether, and buried one of them, which is embarrassing.
Even yesterday, Salah scored a nice finish, but probably should have scored 4 more, maybe. And Newcastle punished them. And if you can't beat Newcastle at home, they won't get in the top 4 now. I really like Joe Willock, by the way. I think he's a really, really good player, and he's doing well at Newcastle. I saw him play for Arsenal a few times, and I always said I like him because he's direct. He's a number 10 that isn't all about creating chances. Sometimes he just thinks, I'm going to make it for myself, and he bursts forward a lot. I like that. I think he looks like a good prospect. And did you see the Wilson goal for Newcastle? It's a disgusting decision. He's literally, the ball's bounced off the keeper. It's hit him here. His arm is in his body. Like, what do you want him to do? Be an amputee? And otherwise he can't score. I felt awful for him. Such a silly law. The sooner they get rid of that rule, the better.
Well, speaking of contentious decisions, actually, I'm going to move nicely on to West Ham Chelsea because Mathieu Balbuena got a red card for something I can't see him even avoiding if he tried to do it again. So basically, he clears the ball with some force, and his feet end up kind of on the back of Ben Chilwell's leg, I think it is. So, the referee says play on. He doesn't even think it's a foul. He gets called to look at the monitor because it might be a questionable decision. Has a looked at it a couple of times and goes, yeah, that's dangerous play. And anyone who's watching it's thinking, well, what's he meant to do? Like, honestly, that was just his momentum taking him, and Ben Chilwell was just in the way of his foot, basically. There's no way of getting around that. So that killed the game as a contest. But either way, Chelsea are kind of in control of 4th place now. 3 points clear, I think, with 5 games to go of the Hammers in 5th. So a real shame that spectacle was killed, really, in the way it was, because I don't think it was dead as a contest, even at 1-0. I think the Hammers were still in it and making chances. So, John, can I get your thoughts on that? Is that season over for you, or is it still anyone's game?
Not yet. I mean, I'm wearing black to mourn the loss of Balbuena and the fact we lost the game 1-0. But there's a lot of positives. You know, we've been talking a lot the last few weeks about sort of West Ham in general and their performances. And where they are in the league, and the kind of the spirit around a club that isn't normally there, getting there. Referred to Leicester today. We spoke about them quite a lot actually in the podcast the last few weeks. And it's just that, like, the underdog or a team that you don't really expect to do something, actually doing something, and you have this kind of investment in like a weird second team that you hope that it will just break the norm for something a bit different, a different narrative around football, and something maybe a bit more exciting, get a bit more money, they might be able to buy some more players, etc., etc. There's a lot of connotations where you finish in the league. Is 4th place over it? No, it's not. I mean, mentioned Liverpool already. Chelsea's running is slightly harder. So West Ham predominantly have got the teams they would normally face around them from sort of, like 14th to 8th roughly in the next 5 games. Chelsea are playing Liverpool, and I had this thing, I thought, okay, maybe, they might do something, but I just don't think they will. So it's going to be a matter of Leicester, slipping up, and they're 6 points ahead. They need to lose 2 games out of 5, which I don't really see happening. But you've got to keep believing. That's what I said the last couple of weeks. You've got to have a bit of belief, and put your cards on the table and say, like, yeah, let's just go for it. And if we don't make it, you know, football fans in general can be a bit fickle. And as I said before, a lot of West Ham fans have been like that in the past. I've just enjoyed the season. You know, it's a shame that the fans haven't been there to enjoy it, especially because, you know, maybe they've done better because that's been part of the factor where they've not been riding them every week if they concede or, you know, miss an easy chance. But I just hope that there's going to be enough momentum to go through. I spoke about the thinness in the squad. That's come to kind of rear its head. But the biggest thing for me is that at 1-0, they scored just before half-time. They didn't come out second half and just be like, oh, this is done now. They actually went for it a little bit, kept playing, stuck to their game plan, very structured. Everyone's working for each other. And, you know, that's without Declan Rice, without an actual centre-forward. We didn't look out of sorts like we were going to get pulled apart. You roll back a few years, West Ham sort of got slaughtered in that game. It would have been like 5-1 or something ridiculous. So definitely progress on the pitch, really happy with everything. And just a bit of an unfortunate, you know, turnaround. But, I mean, if that's a red card, everyone was saying, you know, pundits, people on Twitter, Facebook, the whole lot, people that don't support West Ham are just, you know, if that's a red card, football's dead, which we've heard a lot with VAR this year. He's not looking at him. He just tries to clear it. It's not like John Stones the other week, which I did think was a bad tackle because he's gambled there. They were both going for the same ball and he just completely misjudged it. This wasn't a misjudgment. He's just cleared the ball and ended up landing on him with his foot, basically. But as he's gone to step back, and that's it. I mean, it looks bad in slow motion, but it just isn't. That's never a red card.
Well, they had a very similar tackle, I think, further on in the game, didn't they? Was it? There was another one where he wasn't even given a yellow card, and it was the same sort of thing where the momentum carried him into the player, and you just thought, well, if that's going to get a red, straight red, surely that warrants at least a yellow. I think it was Souček actually followed through in a very similar way, and the momentum caught one of the Chelsea players, and they went down. I think it was Rudiger went down as if he'd been shot again. Play on. So the inconsistencies are there, which is mad. And VAR, I wouldn't be sad to see it go, to be honest, but we won't talk too much about VAR right now. I haven't got enough time for that to cover VAR. But Myles, you look poised. What are you going to say?
The only caveat for the red card that might justify it, I do not think it was a red card at all. I felt really bad for Bob Brenner because he's clearly not intended to do anything there. But one of the things they talk about is it dangerous play where you're out of control of what you're doing? And he does slip into it. His standing foot, if you notice, is upside down almost. So he hasn't really got control of where his follow through is going. So I can see why you might deem it dangerous, but it would take a slow-mo VAR to think that. I don't think if you watch that back at full speed and understand just it's basically physics, isn't it? It's the motion and carrying. He's not fouled the player at all. It's a shame that there's a collision, but it is an awful decision. That's the only reason I looked at it and thought I can see why you might send him off there because
it's not dangerous play. It reminds me of when players collide and clash heads. Like both body parts are going for the same thing, and the momentum brings them together. No one's at fault in a clash of heads. No one's at fault in this particular instance either. I just think that's one thing they got massively wrong. And even after seeing it replayed a couple of times, he still thought it was a straight red. Yeah, that's madness. I still think VAR is coming down to a person's decision at the end of the day as well. It's meant to be technology deciding whether it's right or wrong, and it's not. It's still an opinion of a guy sitting in a room with a screen. So he's just like the rest of us, really, isn't he? The guy in Stockley Park at VAR, whoever it might have been. So yeah, not ideal. But looking at the run-ins for West Ham anyway, they've got a pretty kind run-in. I think it's Burnley next, Everton, Brighton, West Brom, Southampton. They've got quite a kind run-in for the top four run. So I still think they've got a chance. I mean, Chelsea have only got to squeak once.
You've got to believe. There's something there where they could potentially do it. They've got to win their games and hope. Unfortunately, it is out of their hands. Someone else has got to slip up a little bit. But all it takes is a Liverpool-Chelsea draw in 2 weeks' time, I believe that is, or in the next 10 days. If West Ham can win the game and get a draw or whatever, they're still in the running. It'll go down to the last. I hope it goes down to the last couple of games.
Yeah, I mean, has your opinion changed on the top four makeup now? Do you think Chelsea have got it in the bag, Myles, or is that still game on?
I think it's Chelsea's now. I always said that I thought they would make it, and if West Ham were to get in, I think it's more likely that it would be Leicester that slipped up enough to let them in. Yeah. The gap does seem big enough now. But you say West Ham have got a kind run in, but Burnley won 4-0 somewhere.
Oh, that's mad.
Something we didn't mention, to be fair, when we were talking about Mourinho, who takes
Espirito Santo. Yeah, I was going to say the same.
And I do think that there were probably 2 Premier League managers that before this season you would have said were in great contention for it, in Hasenhüttl and Nuno at Wolves. They both look primed for the next big English job, or at least a step up.
True.
I'm not sure you'd want either of them at the moment. I feel for Nuno because he's obviously had the injury to Jimenez, but if you're losing 4-0 to Burnley and Southampton love a 9-0, I don't think I'd be looking at either of them.
Well, I just think it's one of those fixtures. There were quite a few this week where the teams had pretty much nothing to play for. And I think Wolves are already on, can you say on the beach in COVID times? Their minds were on the beach at least. But you could tell it was almost like a dead rubber fixture to them. They had nothing to play for. And that's not an indictment on Nuno. He's a quality coach. Same with Hasenhüttl. Quality coach. But
stock shot, though.
It is, but I mean, where would you have placed each of those teams at the start of the season? Somewhere between 8th and 15th, and that's exactly where they're going to finish, really, isn't it? So, mission accomplished in some ways, as boring as that sounds. Anyway, guys, I've got nothing else to cover today. Have you got anything else you want to talk about from the footballing week, or have we exhausted everything? No pressing topics. We've covered it all. I don't want to talk about the European Super League for a long time because it's so depressing. So hopefully that's buried for a while.
We're back to European football this week, though, at least, so we can look forward
to
true. Europa League. Although UEFA played a blinder there as well, didn't they? Snuck in the change of the Champions League format while everyone else cried about other things.
Yeah, and the reaction from players has been, this is not in our interest to have this many games being played, and the whole coefficient system. I don't know if you know the ins and outs of the qualifications for it. It's basically still a closed shop to the best, most consistent, high-ranking teams. So, it's still like a Super League light. And I think, as Ilkay Gundogan said, it's just the lesser of the two evils, really, having this redrawn Champions League. Sounds like that's all been sort of ratified and legally finalised as well. So this new Champions League is going to happen, whether we like it or not.
And I think this weekend, with United dropping points today, City won 2 trophies today for sure, which is a shame. It looked like we might have a little bit of a race on.
We talk about a title race, and I joked about it, and I was genuinely joking that it's a title race because, let's face it, if United were 3 points off the top at this point, they would have played 10 times better than they did today. But instead, they mentally clocked out a couple of weeks ago. So that's disappointing as a United fan. See United players just go, yeah, we've got nothing to play for. This is it. And draw 0-0 to Leeds. Leeds should be a fixture they're up for anyway, historically. And they just didn't show up. It's dull. Anyway, let's not go there. I'm not going to wind up Dave list later in the show. Don't start him off. Anyway, guys, that's it for this week. Tune in same time next week on Sunday at 7:30 for the same again. But in the meantime, thanks a lot for your time, guys, and thank you for viewing. For everyone who's been watching. See you next time. Cheers.
Good night, guys.
See you later.